Welcome, Victoria. I'm so excited to have you here. We used to work together a long time ago at La Jolla Group, and I was just thinking about it, and I feel like it was 15 years ago or something. We've known each other.
Yeah. Math is not my forte, but yeah. Let's see. 7. Yeah, I'm going to go with yes. It was a long time ago.
At the time, I was an accessories designer, and I think at the time you were doing men's, working with Zach.
Yes, you're right. And there were probably like 6 employees, weren't there?
Yeah, it was quite small.
When we were specifically very small. Yeah. So yeah, started with men's and was working with Zach.
And then eventually you worked into juniors or girls or women's, right?
Yeah. And I was there a total of 5 years.
What happened after that? Was that your first job in the industry?
It was, yes. So I graduated with my BFA in fashion up in San Francisco and then moved straight down to Orange County and started where we met. So I was there for several years, did menswear, went into juniors, and actually my senior collection or my emphasis in school was in kids wear. And so that was really my passion and something I really wanted to explore more. And so after leaving La Jolla Group, I moved up to LA and worked for Big Box that you probably heard of, Walmart. And so did a tween line for them, which was actually really fun. It was definitely a different perspective, coming from La Jolla, but kind of seeing how just one of the largest product company does business and kind of seeing the ins and outs of that. I mean, like anything, have their pros and cons in any way. I was kind of a very, very small fish in a very big sea there. So I did something specific. I was designing a tweens line, but, someone was merchandising. Someone was coming up with color concepts. Like I would bring silhouettes and ideas to the table and sketch, but then, in the end, someone was doing final sketches, and that was the art department. So it was very, I had one job, and it was a very kind of stay in your lane, the best way to put it, which, I think some of us like that.
Yes.
Myself, and I have a feeling you as well, kind of like to explore the bigger picture and kind of get our hands in everything. So that was a kind of a first experience in that, but knew that maybe wasn't where I wanted to take it for years and years. So super phenomenal experience and very cool to work with so many moving parts. And then from there, I actually started freelancing on my own. So this would have been 10 years ago. So since then, I have had my own children's wear line. So right after that, I jumped in and did my own line. Did that for about 3 years. I did it locally, natural, sustainable, all that good stuff. Produced and manufactured here, and was in a few stores around the world, in Japan, some locally. So not super big, very small. And I was a one-man team. Again, I know how that is.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, it is. So I did that for several years. Amazing experience. While that in tandem, I was doing that, I started freelancing for a few activewear brands, which activewear was booming at the time, 10 years ago, still is. But so, yeah, started working with activewear brands on more, I would say, more of a consulting side. So even though I'm trained in design and much of my experience up to now was strictly design, now I was looked at to do anything from concept, color trends, design, or just sketching, where designers would come to me and say, this is my hand sketch, I need a technical flat. When I was prepping everything in my brain, I researched some fun little quotes, and I found someone stating that technical designers were the engineers of fashion, which I thought was really cool. So they're obviously the literal technical side of things. And so I kind of do it all. So really now the past 10 years, I've worked strictly with startups, and it's just kind of happened that way. But I think when I look back, I think where kind of what my calling is and what I'm most interested in. And even though I'm a trained, design professional, I also have been at the beginning of starting a product line. And while you have a leg up when you're already trained in that, there's still a lot of aspects that you have to teach yourself that someone that's not trained would have to figure out as well. Sales and going to my own trade shows and having a booth and, all that fun stuff that I know you've done and we've talked about. That is not our favorite. So kudos to sales reps.
Yeah, thank you, sales reps. So I know now you're an apparel brand and design consultant. If someone wanted to hire you, what are the different things that you could help a new emerging brand do?
Sure. So at times I can kind of just be small pieces of the puzzle. Someone that's just starting with an idea saying, hey, I have a passion for clothes. I want to start a dance wear brand. But I don't have any idea about designs and anything like that. So I can help them from that. But then I also will work at times as a consultant, hey, we're this brand, we do these numbers a year. We've been in business 5 years. What we really need you for is like trend and concept. So I'm really just that for them. So
That's
as a
cool.
consultant, ultimately, I hate this word, but I guess just offering my expertise in
Yeah.
whatever capacity that is. And there's definitely been times that someone will tell me what they need, and I say, oh, I can offer this to you. But with your brand, I might not be the best. Like an accessory brand, that's very much
Yeah.
your forte, not mine. I actually worked for a company that was works for NASA. Anyways, long
Oh,
story
cool.
short, we were building this accessory for a robot, which was very cool. It was like an underwater robot. So that was the stretch for me, no doubt. But at times I'd say like, hey, I wouldn't be good for this, but let me put you into contact with somebody else. Going back to someone coming and kind of not knowing what the next step is. So let's say you want to be a line of, say, sports bras for, larger chested women, but you don't know where to start. I'd see what brands that you're into, and we'd really start with the basics. And then from there, you might have samples from other brands and, you like how this feels, this fabric. So basically we get everything together.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that someone's coming to me with some extent of like a line plan. I'd say that would be the first step into starting a product company, would be kind of what's your story, what's your concept. So like I've had people come to me and need help from the very, very beginning of, I want to start a clothing line, but I don't really know what I want to do. And I appreciate the passion and just wanting to make that jump. But
Yeah.
ultimately, I would do best if someone came to me with more of a concept or what they'd like. So I'd say in that case, like, oh, maybe look at things like this, like what are you drawn to? And then they'd come back to me with more of a concept or what they're looking for. So I'd go from there. We'd get a trend, color, all that fun stuff. I'd do technical sketches. I tend to do more sketching on the computer than by hand. I feel like that kind of skips that step. While, hand sketches are fun and can visually be wonderful, I feel like, I'm quick enough on the computer that I can technical sketch. We can plop into that technical package that's later for the factory. So you're kind of skipping that step, because always we need to be efficient with time. And then most cases, I'll play the technical designer as well as a consultant, and I will build this technical package that has everything. It's just like the Bible. I'd love to hear how you describe it, but it's basically, the engineered Bible that the factory needs to create it.
I call it
They
a
don't need to
blueprint.
really, a blueprint. I like that. You're like, no, let's not go the Bible route.
I mean, Bible's good too.
Bible. Very important. So, so I'd say that, the technical designer job is imperative. I mean,
Yeah.
it's definitely the technical side of things, can be less creative. So I've actually over the years really liked that part of it. I did not at first. I think everybody that does, graduates from design school is like, no, I don't want to do technical. I want to be
Yeah.
creative and flowy. And, but I've learned to really appreciate that side of things. And I think my brain tends to like that blueprint. I really like seeing that. After that, then we shoot to manufacturers and kind of go from there.
What you're saying is so true, that sometimes it's not your expertise, it's not your specialty. Whereas like I love bags. Bags are my specialty. I can make a tech pack for bags all day. But if someone wanted me to make a tech pack for activewear, I would be lost because I don't know anything about the measurements or the grading or anything like that. And that's when I would call in someone like you to help me with that.
Oh, I thank you. Call on me.
I will.
But so true. You're someone that always comes to mind when I think of accessories, because you were definitely my first experience in that, and just in my career. I still don't know a ton about it, but so our tech packs, that is one thing, can look very similar from a far standpoint, or someone that didn't know. But you're right, like specs, call out stitch types are different. Like activewear stitch types we use a lot of flat lock, for example, and it's a stitch that prevents chafing to some extent, but also is very strong. But then a denim designer, their tech pack would look quite different, right? So they would deal with stitch lines that are also specific to denim. I hate when someone comes to me and is like, hey, can you develop the sock for us? I'm like, oh, I hate saying no, but I'm not the best person.
I feel like that shows professionalism. Like sometimes even when choosing a manufacturer, they're like, we can do anything. We can do clothes,
Right.
we can do bags.
That's huge.
And you're like,
yes.
no, you don't. Like,
No, you can't. Tell me the truth.
tell me the truth, you little booger.
Tell me the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely. Factories also have their specialties that they're really good at some things and not so great at other things. And sometimes they're very eager to get your business. So they'll say, we can do that. And that's not really what they're great at. Okay, before we dive into manufacturing, can you tell me a little bit about your philosophy on product assortment or product ranges? And when someone is wanting to launch a clothing line, what is your philosophy on how many styles you should offer when you're launching a clothing brand?
Sure. I think it depends, one, on your concept and your story. Like, what do you bring? The bra example. I think the person that's starting a line for larger breasted women, I think they could start with 1 to 3 bras. It could be very minimal. It's so specific. Yeah. When I started my brand, it was more of a lifestyle sportswear. I think I started with 5 to 6 pieces for mine. It was lifestyle. It was like what you'd wear every day, mix and match. So it would have been hard to start with 1. So I think first off, ask yourself, is this the right product for the market? There. Yeah. What's the product for the market that's needed? And I really just think it depends what you're designing. If your brain is thinking, I want to do a line, then you might need to limit yourself. I'd say start with 5-ish pieces. That's very general, but it's hard to answer that without knowing what the product is. But I really do think it can be specific enough, like a line of bras or the perfect tee line, that kind of thing. You can start with 1 or 2 pieces and there shouldn't be any hesitation in that. Sometimes it works out that really that can be the way to go, because you can really hone in and perfect that item. We're looking at a whole collection. It's so natural to like jump around and then, really just lose sight of what specifically you're doing. So I actually think smaller is better to start.
That's great advice. I love that. I think maybe honing in on your key products or what really represents the brand you're trying to launch is something that would be good to start with, a couple of items, because you have to keep in mind when you're starting a new brand or a new line that there's minimums to keep in mind with factories. So if you are ordering 8 different styles and you have to get 100 of each style, that's a lot of units to keep stored and to sell. So starting with a couple of items is great. And I like what you said about that. Okay, so let's first talk about where you can look for a technical designer. You have your specialty. If someone else is looking for a different type of technical designer, where would you send them?
So I think that I tend to start with even just looking on LinkedIn, but that's a great way. I actually would say that I've found like 25% of my clients they found me through LinkedIn. I'll just get a message or they'll find me, go to my website and then contact me through there. You can just query in the search box what you're looking for. You could be specific, like bra technical designer. I keep using this bra thing, but you can, just query and a ton will come up. You can search locally, search for manufacturers that do bras, blah, blah, blah. So I think LinkedIn is a great place to start, especially someone that's not already in the industry. You have your favorite company that you aspire to be, let's say an activewear, one that everyone might know, let's say Aloe.
Okay.
You can go on LinkedIn and look up Aloe technical designer. It'll pop up who their technical designer is. You can reach out to them. It never hurts. I have gotten responses from people that I thought would never respond. And then, of course, then I never hear from some people. So really, it's almost like job hunting. Somebody in the industry, I would never feel bothered if someone did that to me. If I didn't know how to help them, I'd say, hey, can't help you, or hey, can't help you. Here's the name of one of my friends, and get connected that way. I would say networking is a big thing. Would be hard if you're not actually in the industry. So networking, word of mouth, freelance site. So Upwork's a phenomenal one. I use that when I'm searching for people, but also have used it as a consultant. And I would say that would be where my other 75% of clients are. Wonderful site. Of course, they take the dreaded percentage, which is hard, but
Right.
it has made connections for me that have been long time. The past 4 years of companies that I've met that have been super lucrative for me and phenomenal. So yeah, so I would say look on freelance sites because there's a ton of technical freelance designers.
That's brilliant. I never would have thought of
Yeah.
LinkedIn for that,
Yeah.
or for manufacturers either.
Yeah, that I would say is a little bit more broad. Probably several a week of new manufacturers, very
Oh,
generically salesmen reaching out to me in my messages, in my DMs. My DMs manufacturers, those are the kind of DMs I get.
it gets less
So
exciting when you get
I would
older, the DMs you get.
less excited, right? Um, but then that comes the other, how are they reputable? Everybody's going to say they can do everything, like you've mentioned. They're great at it. They're experts. So that part can be a little tough when you're going through LinkedIn, but it's a way to at least get the ball rolling.
Okay, we dove in a little bit to manufacturing. I would love to hear your advice of where you look for manufacturers in general, and then we can talk a little bit about overseas versus domestic manufacturers and what you usually use.
Okay. So kind of tying into where to look for technical designers, I'd say very similarly to some extent, you can look for manufacturers the same way. I would say that the place to start that I have recommended, but also used myself when I was doing my line, would be trade shows. A lot of trade shows will have a day of sourcing. So, for example, the large trade show that they have in Vegas would be Magic. So, while I know trade show can be time and money, I would say that would be a great way to find manufacturers because they would be a large part of sourcing at Magic. But then also while you're there, you can look for fabrication, for trims. It's kind of a one-stop shop for all of that and connections. A few resources I even use myself outside of LinkedIn, which I've mentioned, would be the CFDA has a resource link. So if you just Google CFDA, they have a ton of resource links for manufacturers, fabrication, all of the above that I just mentioned. So that's a great resource. And then there's also this site that I use personally, and I also use for some of my clients called Makers Row. And I believe it's just makersrow.com. You've probably heard of it. Super easy and accessible, I think, for especially startups. So someone that's starting a line can just go there, probably produce a line on their own. They can find manufacturers that do it from beginning to end, which is vertical manufacturing. You come with an idea, you contact this specific type of factory, and they'll take your idea from very beginning to end. They'll start with sketches and then they'll produce it and it'll be on your doorstep. Of course, that can be a bit more expensive and it's a different route, but can also be a great route for someone just starting out any type of product line. So Makers Row is a great resource, super user friendly on the site. I think I mentioned networking, which can be hard if you don't have a network yet, but just word of mouth, talking to people. Again, cold emailing on LinkedIn, super easy. And then I would say, just because this is the route I went for my line, just touching on like ethical, sustainable, if you're looking for manufacturers specifically there's a ton of resources online that you can just research how to find ethical factories and all that. You can see the accreditations you should ask for. And while any factory can say, we're ethical or we're natural or we're sustainable or whatever, those are very obviously, we know, buzzwords. So
Right.
actually asking for accreditations and paper trails basically is always a good route if that's something important to you. Just using online as a tool, I mean, just over this whole conversation is, I feel like the easiest time to start a product line is now with just
Yes.
online, with the internet.
I couldn't imagine before that how people
No.
did it. You just walk down
No.
downtown LA, like, do you make activewear? Do you make activewear? Like,
No.
how do you find that? You just have to
Do you
ask
have
around.
quality product? Okay.
Yeah, I believe you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you think? What do you usually use overseas versus domestic manufacturing? And what do you recommend?
I've used both in a nutshell. So someone tells me what products they're looking to produce, and I would judge from there and also what they're looking to spend ultimately. That's, cost is a huge thing, as we all know. Things that are produced here in the US tend to be more expensive than when they're produced overseas. So I would say, first off, depends on your product. So talk to a consultant, talk to people in the business, and you can start to get an idea what would be a right fit for you. So some just big things to look at domestically, some perks that I found. I loved being able to really oversee what was happening with my line. So for me, I did more of the organic route, sustainable. I wanted it produced here. So I was able to drop into my sewer or my factory and just kind of see that, everything was okay. I liked building those relationships. So that's the big perk I got from
Yeah,
doing it here locally.
that's amazing.
Other big perk was I had very low minimums. So I was ultimately producing at a more of a sample number. So when someone produces a line like Lululemon, they are producing gazillions amounts of a black legging specific to one style. So locally, you're able to produce so much less. And sometimes that's what we're dealing with when you're starting your line.
Yeah.
So MOQ and minimum order quantity, the big conversation. Locally, we have the issue of cost is obviously higher. So when you go overseas, you can really drop costs a substantial amount, but then naturally, because they're able to drop cost, their requirements for MOQs are much higher. So while here, you can produce as much as you want. You can do 5 pieces of a bra, basically a sample run. While overseas requirements can be, I'm not finding them much less than 250 for a colorway. So you have your bra, you have 3 colors, you're going to need 250 pieces of each piece. So that's a hard thing, I think, for new brands. I deal with it with everybody I work with. I dealt with it myself. I'm sure you did as well. Kind of that push and pull of like, okay, well, my product's going to be pretty pricey and expensive. And I hope people understand and get why it is. And that can put a different pressure on what you're producing. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we can talk about pros and cons all day of overseas and locally, but I feel like the biggest conversation is cost and then minimums.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think another important piece is how convenient it is to have a manufacturer nearby that you can go and check and say, okay, that's exactly what I want. Or before you make any more, make this change. And communication's a lot faster. And I think it also depends on your customer. If it's important to your customer to have things made US or sustainably, then they're willing to pay that extra cost for the things that are made domestically.
Yes. And you hope that's how they feel and get that. But yeah, it's very
Yeah.
true. I mean, when I did my line, that was something that was important to me to be able to kind of oversee it and actually really just have relationships with everybody I was working with. That was a big part of it. I personally love doing things locally in the US. But, I have wonderful relationships with factories overseas and have learned a lot from them. So there's definitely perks there.
Are there any additional resources or actionable takeaways that you would share with someone that's wanting to launch their own product-based business?
Yeah, I love that you say actionable takeaways because I know that's something big for you and something big for me as well. And I think that's huge for somebody starting a line because you can do a podcast, you can say all this stuff and fluff, and it's there, but it's like, okay, so what's actually my next steps? I would say really starting with some semblance of an outline. Who's your customer? What's your actual product? What's your passion? So going back to that whole story thing, like what are you bringing to your customer that's going to wow them? I know that sounds so cheesy, but it really is what it is. If you're going to be a t-shirt line, how's it going to be different than the 1 million other t-shirt lines? And I think hearing this as maybe someone with a new product, it could definitely deter you, but really it's just about what makes it special. Is it about you? Is it, put yourself into it. And so I think the big thing would be is like have that solid idea and then other people can really help you run with the product. Maybe someone that's watching this is gung-ho, ready, and this is super inspiring. But then also I know myself, and I'm sure if I was watching this and had a product, there's a lot of hesitation. So I'd say just keep moving forward with what you're passionate about, and people will see that. People will see that through the product. Definitely give it thought, talk to others, tell them your ideas, stay strong with what your passion is, because other ideas can kind of deter you at times, especially starting your own line, starting your own product. But I found, kind of knowing what was important to me, staying true to that, but then talking to others that I thought might be my customer, and then some that aren't, about what I wanted to produce and how they, would talk about that. What were other lines that they loved and maybe saw similar. So kind of just getting feedback from people, but again, really staying strong and true to what you want to do and not letting that part sway.
Yes. I appreciate that. Yeah, like understanding your why. Maybe why are you doing this?
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much, Victoria, for doing this with me. I know it was a little sketchy here and there you're my first interview, so I'm just getting used to
sketchy.
This, Life is sketchy.
It was great. Life is so sketchy.
But I really appreciate your knowledge. I feel like you mentioned, technical designers can be kind of hard to find, and I feel like your knowledge is really valuable. You know a lot about fabrics and stitches and how to do this whole thing. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. Can you tell me where the listeners can find you if they wanted to reach out?
Yeah, definitely. So here I go with LinkedIn right again. Definitely find me on LinkedIn. Oh, I love it. I should probably pay for the premium or something. I think I had it for a second, but don't anymore.
Or maybe they should pay you because you're sponsoring them.
There you go.
Right now. Yeah.
Here I am. Right? Yeah. So easy, I'm pretty easy to find. I'm sure you'll have my name typed somewhere, but Victoria Dickson, you can find me on LinkedIn. My website is vdickson, DICKSON.com. Maybe you can throw that in. So yeah, that'll have my contact. You can see all my work there, vdickson.com. And yeah, I don't have a big online presence, but I think if you Google my name, it might be there.
Might pop up.
Might pop up. Thank you so much.